My wedding day should have been perfect, as James waited for me at the altar, surrounded by wealth and luxury. None of us expected his pregnant ex to burst through those doors. What happened next changed everything and revealed the shocking truth about the man I almost married. Hey there! Before I get into what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, I want to ask you something. Have you ever believed you knew someone completely, only to discover you never really knew them at all? If you love stories about unexpected wedding drama and sweet karma, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more. Trust me, you'll want to see how this all unfolds. My name is Emma, and 6 months ago, I was standing in a bridal suite, staring at myself in a designer wedding dress that cost more than my first car. I couldn't believe how far I'd come, from a struggling art teacher to the soon-to-be wife of James Whitmore, one of the city's most eligible bachelors. I met James at a charity gala where I was helping coordinate the silent auction. I remember how he stood out in the crowd, tall, confident, with a smile that seemed to light up the room. His custom suits and the way people gravitated toward him screamed success. When he approached me that night, I assumed he was going to ask about one of the art pieces. Instead, he asked for my number. Our relationship was a whirlwind. Within 3 months, we were inseparable. James showered me with gifts, designer clothes, weekend getaways on private jets, dinners at restaurants where reservations were booked months in advance. He'd surprise me with jewelry just because, and talked about the mansion we would live in after the wedding. My friends were in awe, my parents were impressed, and I was completely swept off my feet. When he proposed, after just 5 months with a ring that made my coworkers gasp, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Looking back, there were red flags I chose to ignore. The way he'd never introduce me to his business partners, how he'd take phone calls in another room, his voice dropping to a whisper, the fact that he was vague about his past relationships. But when you're wrapped up in what feels like a fairy tale, you don't want to question the magic. You don't want to be the one who shatters the dream. The wedding plans were extravagant. A historic cathedral, hundreds of guests, most of whom I'd never met, a reception at the city's most exclusive venue, and a honeymoon planned for a private island. Everything was orchestrated to perfection, because that's what James demanded. Perfect. Every detail, every moment, scrutinized and approved. I found myself becoming someone I didn't recognize, obsessed with appearances, worried about what his wealthy friends would think of me. And yet, despite all the luxury surrounding me, there was this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, a voice I kept silencing. I wish I had listened to it sooner. I wish I had asked more questions before I found myself standing at the altar, about to pledge my life to a man who was about to be exposed in the most dramatic way possible. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that morning. The morning I woke up believing I was about to marry my soulmate, not knowing that in just a few hours, my entire world would crumble before my eyes as the cathedral doors burst open, revealing a truth I wasn't prepared to face. I woke up to sunshine streaming through the curtains of my hotel suite, that familiar mixture of excitement and nerves dancing in my stomach. My bridesmaids arrived in a flurry of champagne and laughter, and for a moment, everything felt exactly as it should. Perfect, just as James wanted. The bridal suite transformed into a glamorous assembly line, makeup artists, hairstylists, photographers capturing every spontaneous moment. My maid of honor, Sophia, handed me a gift from James, a diamond bracelet with a note that read, "To my flawless bride." I couldn't help but notice how he'd underlined "flawless" twice. He's sent over 3 different people to make sure everything's on schedule, Sophia whispered, while helping me into my dress. The wedding planner looks like she's about to have a breakdown. We laughed, but something in her eyes suggested concern rather than amusement. My phone kept lighting up with texts from James. Make sure your makeup isn't too heavy. Did the florist fix the centerpieces? My parents are asking about your parents. Each message tightened the knot in my chest, but I responded with reassurance and heart emojis. This was just pre-wedding stress, I told myself. Normal. From my window, I could see guests arriving, men in tailored suits, women dripping in jewels and designer labels, James's business associates, celebrities, politicians, people whose names I'd only read in magazines. My small circle of friends and family looked almost out of place among them. As I prepared to leave for the cathedral, my father took my hands in his and searched my eyes. "You still sure about this, Emma?" he asked quietly. I nodded quickly, too quickly perhaps. "He's everything I've ever wanted, Dad. If only I'd known then that sometimes getting everything you think you want can be the worst thing that could happen to you." The drive to the cathedral was a blur of nervous smiles, and my father's reassuring hand over mine. But as our car pulled up to the church steps, I spotted James outside, furiously arguing with someone on his phone. His face was flushed, jaw clenched, in that way I'd learned meant trouble. When he saw our car, he quickly ended the call and disappeared inside. My father frowned. "Everything okay?" I nodded automatically, though the knot in my stomach tightened. James was probably just dealing with some last-minute wedding details, I told myself. He was a perfectionist, after all. Inside the bridal waiting room, Sophia helped adjust my veil, while my other bridesmaids fussed with my train. That's when I overheard two of James's cousins whispering just outside the door. "Can't believe he had the nerve to invite the Millers after what happened with their daughter," one said. "Melissa was a mess for months after he dumped her," the other replied. I heard they noticed my bridesmaid standing there and quickly walked away. Melissa. The name hung in the air like a dark cloud. James had mentioned her once, an ex-girlfriend from before we met. "Just a casual thing," he'd said dismissively, ended mutually. But something about those whispers sent a chill through me. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Are you sure you know who you're marrying?" I deleted it immediately, hands trembling slightly. Probably just a prank, I reasoned, or a jealous acquaintance. The wedding coordinator poked her head in. "5 minutes," she announced, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "James is asking if you've taken the anxiety medication he sent over this morning." I hadn't. I'd forgotten about the small pill he'd insisted would keep me calm. Now I wondered, was it for my benefit or his? As the music began, I pushed these thoughts away. Too late for doubts, too late for questions. The cathedral doors loomed before me, massive and ornate. My father squeezed my hand and whispered, "Not too late to run, kiddo," with a nervous laugh that didn't quite sound like a joke. I forced a smile and shook my head. The music swelled, not the traditional wedding march, but a custom orchestral piece James had commissioned specifically for this moment. Everything had to be unique. Everything had to be impressive. As the doors swung open, I was hit by a wave of gasps and murmurs. 300 guests rose to their feet in perfect unison. Like a choreographed dance, the cathedral was transformed. Thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers, silk drapery cascading from the ceiling. It looked more like a movie set than a place of worship. My eyes found James at the altar, tall and commanding in his bespoke tuxedo. He didn't smile, not fully, but gave a slight nod of approval as he scanned me from head to toe. I suddenly felt like I was being evaluated rather than admired. His best man, a business partner I'd only met twice, leaned over and whispered something in his ear. James's jaw tightened. With each step down the endless aisle, strange details caught my attention. How half the church was filled with people I'd never met. How James's mother dabbed at dry eyes, performing emotion for the cameras. How the wedding planner stood tensely by the side door, frantically typing on her phone. Time seemed to slow. 20 steps from the altar, I locked eyes with one of James's uncles, the only family member who had declined his invitation to join the wedding party. His expression was one of unmistakable pity. 10 steps away, James extended his hand, his expression unreadable. 5 steps, and I could smell his expensive cologne, mixed with something else. Anxiety, perhaps. As my fingers touched his, the cathedral fell silent. Perfect, pristine silence. And then came the sound of the back doors crashing open. The sound echoed through the cathedral like a thunderclap. Every head turned as one collective gasp filled the air. There, framed by the massive doorway, stood a woman I'd never seen before. Her face was streaked with tears, her makeup running in dark rivers down her cheeks. Her caramel hair was disheveled, her designer dress wrinkled. But what everyone noticed, what no one could possibly miss, was her very pregnant belly, straining against the fabric of her dress. James. Her voice cracked with emotion, carrying through the perfect acoustics of the cathedral. How could you? The silence that followed was deafening. I felt James's hand turn to ice in mine, his fingers suddenly rigid. When I looked at his face, the color had drained completely, leaving behind a mask of pure shock before quickly hardening into cold fury. Security, he hissed to someone behind us. But no one moved. The woman took several steps forward, one hand protectively over her rounded stomach, the other clutching what looked like a stack of papers. "I'm Melissa," she announced, her voice steadier now, addressing not just James, but the entire congregation. "And I'm carrying James Whitmore's child. The child he told me to take care of when I told him I was pregnant 3 months ago." My mind reeled. 3 months ago. We were already engaged then, already planning this very wedding. James dropped my hand and stepped forward. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice unnaturally calm, despite the vein pulsing in his temple. "This woman is clearly disturbed. Someone remove her." But Melissa stood her ground. "I have the proof," she said, waving the papers, "the text messages, the doctor's confirmation, the payments you made to keep me quiet." I looked from her tear-stained face to James' cold one, and suddenly saw something I'd been missing all along. The truth. "I loved you." Melissa's voice trembled as she addressed James, seemingly forgetting the hundreds of eyes watching. "We were together for 2 years. 2 years, James. And the moment I told you about our baby, you acted like I was trying to ruin your life." Murmurs rippled through the cathedral. 2 years. James had told me his longest relationship before me had lasted 6 months, that he'd never been in love before. "She's lying," James hissed, but his words lacked conviction. A sheen of sweat had broken out across his forehead. Melissa pulled out her phone. "Should I read the texts? The ones where you offered me money to make it go away? Or maybe the ones where you threatened to destroy my career if I ever contacted you again?" She looked at me directly then, her eyes swimming with a mixture of pain and sympathy. "I'm sorry. I didn't know about you until last week. He kept you hidden from everyone who knew the real him." My bridesmaid Sophia stepped forward, her face pale. "James told Emma you two dated casually for a few weeks," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Melissa gave a bitter laugh. "We live together. I have the lease with both our signatures. I have photos of us at his parents' anniversary party last year." She nodded toward James's stone-faced parents. "They knew me. They welcomed me into their family." James's mother suddenly seemed intensely interested in her clutch purse. His father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. "The baby is due in 4 months," Melissa continued, her voice breaking. "I thought he deserved to know his child. I thought," she faltered, "I thought he might have changed. I found my voice then, though it sounded distant, even to my own ears. James, is this true?" His eyes met mine, and in that moment, I saw something worse than anger or embarrassment. I saw calculation, him weighing his options, deciding which lie might save him. "Emma, baby, this is just a misunderstanding." James reached for my hand, his voice suddenly syrupy, persuasive. "She's obviously disturbed. I dated her briefly, yes, but this," he gestured dismissively at her pregnant belly. "This can't be mine. She's trying to extort money from us." Before I could respond, a woman stood up from the third row, one of James's colleagues I'd met at a dinner party. "That's not true," she called out, her voice shaking slightly. "I saw you two together at the company retreat last year. You introduced her as your girlfriend." Like a dam breaking, the cathedral erupted. A waiter from James's favorite restaurant approached the altar. You brought her in for your birthday dinner 4 months ago, he said. You told the staff you were celebrating your 2-year anniversary. My head spun as more voices joined the chorus. James's college roommate, his yoga instructor, even his personal assistant rose shakily to her feet, avoiding his murderous glare as she confirmed Melissa's story. James's face contorted with rage. You're all fired, he snarled at his assistant. Every last one of you. He turned to me, gripping my wrist so tightly it hurt. Emma, we're leaving. Now. I yanked my arm away, stumbling backward. My veil caught on a candelabra and tore free from my hair. Don't touch me, I whispered. Then louder. Don't you dare touch me. My mother was suddenly beside me, her arm around my shoulders. My father stepped between James and me, his posture protective. There's more, Melissa said, her voice cutting through the chaos. The trust fund he brags about. It's gone. The investment company? He was fired last year for embezzlement. The mansion he promised you. It's an Airbnb he rents for Instagram photos. The cathedral felt like it was spinning. The perfect fairy tale. The whirlwind romance. The charming prince. It was all smoke and mirrors. And I had almost become another prop in his elaborate lie. A strange calm washed over me as I stood in the wreckage of my wedding day. The cathedral had become a theater of whispers and shocked expressions, but somehow the chaos clarified things. I turned to face James, really seeing him for the first time. How many others? I asked quietly. His eyes darted around the room, calculating his escape. This isn't the place. How many other women, James? My voice grew stronger. A voice called out from near the back. A slender woman in a modest blue dress stood up. He was engaged to my sister 2 years ago. Disappeared a week before the wedding with her savings. Her eyes met mine with painful understanding. We thought we were the only ones. Another woman, seated beside an older couple. He lived with me in Chicago. Said he was a venture capitalist, left owing 3 months' rent. James' mask finally shattered completely. What did you expect? He sneered, his handsome face twisting into something ugly. You all wanted the fantasy, the rich boyfriend, the expensive gifts. None of you asked questions when things didn't add up. Like where the money came from, I said. Pieces falling into place. The cash-only purchases, the borrowed luxury cars, the mysterious investors who never materialized. James's father finally stood, his voice weary. We cut him off years ago. The family money he brags about, it's gone. We've paid off his debts, covered for his schemes. We thought this time. You thought I'd finally trapped a rich one, didn't you, Dad? James laughed bitterly. Emma here teaches kindergarten. She's as broke as I am. I removed the diamond ring, probably cubic zirconia, from my finger. The weight of it had been suffocating me for months without my realizing it. I'd rather be honestly broke than whatever you are, I said, letting it fall to the marble floor with a tiny, insignificant clink. The cathedral had become unnaturally quiet. Even the whispers had died down. As everyone waited to see what would happen next, I stood at the crossroads of my life, surrounded by the elaborate decorations that now seemed as hollow as the man who had chosen them. I think, I said slowly, my voice gaining strength with each word, this wedding is over. Some nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone started to clap, then thought better of it. I turned to face the guests. These strangers and friends who had just witnessed the most humiliating moment of my life. I'm sorry you all came here today for nothing, though I guess it wasn't nothing. It was, I searched for the right word, illuminating. James made one last desperate attempt. Emma, we can still make this work. Everything I felt for you was real. His voice cracked in a perfect imitation of sincerity. I'd once found it charming. Now it just made my skin crawl. No, I said simply. It wasn't. I looked past him to where Melissa stood, one hand still protectively cradling her belly. Our eyes met. 2 women connected by the same terrible man. Something wordless passed between us. Understanding, recognition. I stepped away from the altar, away from James, and walked toward her instead. The crowd parted silently as I moved down the aisle in my ridiculous designer gown. "I'm sorry," I told her when we were face to face. "I didn't know." "Neither did I," she replied. "Not about you." I offered her my hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. Together, we turned our backs on James and walked toward the cathedral doors. Behind us, I could hear his protests, turning to threats, then to pleas, but they grew fainter with each step. Outside, the late afternoon sun was blinding after the dim cathedral lighting. I took a deep breath of fresh air, suddenly aware that I was smiling. It felt like waking up from a long, confusing dream. 6 months later, I'm sitting in a hospital waiting room, thumbing through a magazine I'm not really reading. Down the hall, Melissa is in labor with a little girl who will never know her father, and that's probably for the best. It turns out, James wasn't just a liar about his wealth. 2 weeks after our non-wedding, the police arrested him for fraud. Apparently, he'd been running investment scams for years, using his charm and fabricated credentials to convince people, mostly women he was dating, to invest in non-existent companies. The mansion, the cars, the private jets, all temporary rentals or borrowed from unsuspecting friends, all part of the illusion. The diamond bracelet he gave me the morning of the wedding, stolen from a previous fiancé. The wedding itself had been paid for with credit cards he had no intention of paying off. Even the wedding planner was left with bounced checks. Melissa and I formed an unlikely friendship in the chaos that followed. We compared notes, filled in gaps, and helped each other heal from the manipulation we'd both endured. When her landlord threatened eviction, I offered my spare room. It was strange at first, awkward in ways that sometimes made us laugh, sometimes made us cry, but we got through it together. A nurse appears in the doorway, smiling. "She's asking for you." Inside the delivery room, Melissa looks exhausted but radiant, a tiny bundle cradled against her chest. "Want to meet your honorary niece?" she asks. As I hold the newborn, marveling at her perfect tiny fingers, I realize something profound. The fairy tale I thought I wanted, the wealthy husband, the picture-perfect life, was never real. But this moment, this genuine connection, born from shared pain and authentic support, is worth more than all the false promises James ever made. Some endings are really beginnings in disguise. The happily ever after doesn't always look the way you expect it to. Sometimes it's better